Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may happen to be in the world, and welcome to No Depletes, Master Your Keystone. My name is Dan, and I'm joined once again by the fantastic Fem and the glorious Faithy. Now, hauls could be pretty short from us, in all honesty. We might be saying goodbye to you within 15 minutes, you never know. What you'll find is that, what did we work it out to be? The first 96% is all 96. The same mobs.
6 types of mobs.
Yeah, across almost the entire dungeon. So, Fem, do you want to explain all 6 types of mobs?
Sure. Well, we have, let's see, we have the Dark Blades here. You see them right at the start. They don't really do much. They melee the tank and they do a deadly thrust frontal. It is always aimed towards the tank or the threat target, because sometimes you lose aggro. So just don't stand in front of them. You also have the Gargons, which is the tank slappers. They leave a bleed on the tank. They also have a frontal-ish. If the tank is kiting and you as a melee player would walk in front of them, they would use Jagged Swipe on you. But that's a really hard-hitting physical damage ability that people don't really know about, but that's why they hurt so much. You also have the Obliterators, which just cast Wicked Bolt on the threat target again, usually the tank. They also have the Curse of Obliteration, I believe it is called. Just a curse, goes on one player. Dispel it if you can. If not, move out with the circle. Then you have the Hound Masters, which empower the Gargons every now and then. When they hit 30% health, they will cast Loyal Beasts, which enrages the Gargons, which means the Gargons will deal even more damage to your tank. They also just do random shoots on the party members, and they also disengage and do a rapid fire on a I think 20-second cooldown. And then you have the Collectors, which we're gonna see soon together with the Shard. They just do a Collect Sins cast, which spawns adds and deals damage over time. You want to kick that. If you cannot kick it, you want to stun it, or fear it, whatever you can do to stop the cast. And then you have the Shard of Halkias, which when they die empowers the first boss, like it gives the anima of the shard to the boss. You need to kill all 3 to spawn the first boss. That's why you do them. It's unavoidable. They do a Thrash, which is outrangeable. It deals damage to people within like 35 yards. So if you're 35 yards or further away, you do not take damage from it. Highly recommend as a ranged player and healer if you can. If you're not a paladin or mistweaver. And then they also leave a thing on the ground, very easy to dodge. It spawns under every player. And yeah. Also you have Groundkeepers. Groundkeepers just melee the tank. They cast a Smack. The ability is called Smack. It hurts on the tank. And then obviously you have the Loyal Stoneborns, which it's the Venthir Covenant specific ability for the dungeon. You can mind control the Loyal Stoneborns. They then fight for you. They're very good to use on Pride because they deal a high amount of single target damage. They don't do much AoE. They deal a lot of single target damage, and they also apply a 10% damage reduction aura to anyone in the party while they are active. So they're very good to use for Pride specific.
Brilliant. And that is the first 96% of this dungeon.
Yep.
What we will do from here is we will just let this one run. For the most part, the pathing that you will take in a 15 is pretty much preset at this point. You see that the route that was taken, you have to tackle all 3 shards before you can fight the first boss anyway. So again, very standard. All you do is you take the first pull, which is the patrol, the 2 dark blades in front of you, the obliterator and the dark blade behind the patrol into one pull.
Normally, you lost that.
yeah, normally you would lust that one. It's a relatively big pull, can be quite spicy for the tank, so lusting it and getting it out of the way is very good to do. And then you head off to the right side to fight the first shard. You can see now they've come over to the left side to fight the second shard. Again, there's not much worth talking about in any of these mobs. Fem has covered all of them beautifully. And then you have the third shard, which is just down the ledge and a little bit further forward from this second shard here. Yeah, there's really not a whole lot more to explain on this one, in all honesty. It's all really straightforward. Like the way that it is done normally. I suppose there are different types of mobs if you go, or slightly different types of mobs if you do decide to take anything in what would be the second area, just up the stairs past the first boss. But there's really no need to. That trash is, or the gargoyles in the second area are very hard hitting, and there's really no need to bother with taking those at all, when you can just commit an invisibility potion or a shroud and just go straight up to the second boss when you're done with the first one. Just makes things a little bit easier overall, as this trash is significantly easier to deal with. I did see it mentioned in chat just before. Yes, you can also line the thrash as well. I know that it was answered by Faithy there, but just in case people aren't reading the chat, it can be lined. There aren't very many good places to make use of it unless your tank is going to drag the shard somewhere specific. But just in case the shard is somewhere where you can get a line off, if you are going to die and don't think you can make it out of melee in time, so in particular as slow moving melee classes such as DKs, paladins without horse available, you can find a pillar and just quickly line that one to make sure that you don't die. Really, there's not a whole lot else to talk about in this first area. There's
the dungeon itself is very linear. You go from and then you clear until you have the count that you need, and then you kill off the boss after you've killed the 3 shards. It is pretty straightforward, the dungeon itself. It is the exact 6 same mobs in every single pool, pretty much.
Yep.
Obviously, one mob will be in one pool and one mob in another pool.
Yep.
But it is just, you can change the routing a little bit, like depending on what mobs you prefer playing and where you'd want the pride and where you'd maybe want to do a big pool, where you want to do a smaller pool, depending on your group. But all in all, it is the exact same mobs. It's just the way, like where you pull them, pretty much. Like even on the other side of the room that you normally don't play too much on, it's the exact same mobs. It is basically just a duplicated the side. So as long as you get the 3 stones down, you get your 80% before you go towards the second boss.
Yep.
That is pretty much like the entirety of the first 96% of the dungeon. There's not going to be any other mobs before the mini boss that will give you the last count. Obviously, there's bosses that we'll talk about and mention, but the dungeon itself is pretty straightforward.
What do you think it is that makes this a lot of people's one of their favorite dungeons? Do you think that it's something uniform for everybody, or do you think it is just a little bit different for everyone?
I think the answer is very easy. This dungeon has like big pulls, but it's also mostly tank related damage. Nobody cares except the tank. I hate this dungeon because it's horrible. Everything hurts.
Yeah.
But for DPS, it's like the most chill dungeon because you don't have to do anything other than deal damage.
Sure.
So,
would you say that that's the same for a dungeon like Mists of Turner Scythe?
Yeah. I don't like Mists either.
No, instead you like, what was it you said in the last episode that you liked?
I can't remember what it was.
Oh, you like Plaguefall, I think you said.
Yeah, I'm sure there was something more weird than that he said that he liked.
Oh,
I can't remember.
Sanguine, I believe.
Sanguine, that was it. Yeah, you said that you liked Sanguine. Yeah. Whereas everyone else, at least that I know, has always talked about despising Sanguine with a passion, myself included.
Yeah.
You know, to hell with that dungeon. Forget about that one. But yeah, no, it's definitely one of the easier dungeons. I do think it's also nice that it's such a short timer as well. It feels like Shadowlands is inundated with dungeons that have particularly long timers. You know, you look at the other side, which has just been increased to 43 minutes. You look at Sanguine with 39 minutes. You look at Theatre with 37. It's, you know, there are a lot of very long dungeons, which is which it is kind of annoying. You know, I would prefer it if an average time for each dungeon was 30 minutes, and maybe even bring in some that are less than that. You know, like it would, like, say the shortest timer would be 22, 23 minutes in terms of the actual M+ timer for the dungeon to complete it, meaning that you can potentially get the dungeon done within 15 to 20 minutes at a push. You know, it's I feel like that would be nicer overall, rather than introducing these really long dungeons that require almost an hour to complete, especially if you are looking at doing higher keys, and you know, you need to consider the pre-planning and sorting out cooldowns and stuff. You know, tackling one key, especially as the keys go up in level, it can begin to take an hour if you include prep time as well. It's not the most fun, you know. You'd like to be able to get into these dungeons and just blast them out, get on to the next one, and just keep rolling through them. It would be more ideal for sure. But oh, Fem died. Fem, this dungeon's easy. Why are you dying?
And then I tried to Door of Shadows.
Yes.
While in line of sight.
Expected.
But that, I suppose that goes to show that the Gargans, even on a 15, this is Fem on his main, by the way.
Yeah, that's my main character with 34% versatility.
Yeah, so this is his main character, and he's still dying, mostly to Gargans, to be fair. They're insane mobs. They're a bit silly, but and even being a prot warrior won't help with that, because it's the bleed that does the most anyway. But yeah, not to worry. So finally, we are moving on to the first boss, which is Halkias the Sin-Stained. And Faithy, do you want to run us through this one here?
Hulk is a pretty straightforward boss. In theory, he does only really have two mechanics. He has a tank mechanic, which is heavy debris, or crumbling slam, which hits a slam on the ground where the tank is standing and leaves a pool in the ground. What you can do, as Fem is doing, is that just before the ability comes out, is that you go into the stuff on the ground and you'll put the slam there again. This is basically just for managing room, or managing like the boss where it puts the stuff, and you'll have way more space to work with. Secondly, you have the heavy debris, which just goes in a random player, and it's a swirly that drops down and it spawns one of those circles as well. And those two are the only mechanics outside of this spin, this sunlight beam. So it's basically just four angles that spins around either clockwise or anti-clockwise, and it can change mid channel. So it can't go right first and then go left a little bit later. It is very, very slow though, so it's pretty easy to adapt to it. And outside of that, there's the ring around the boss that if you go outside of it, you'll get feared. But that is pretty much the only mechanic for the boss. It's very, very straightforward. It's just about managing space, which the debris on the ground, and then not getting hit by the beam.
Yeah, exactly. Again, as Faithy mentioned, very straightforward boss. You may have seen in maybe some YouTube highlight videos clips of Halkias either not spinning and people dying to the beams, or spinning like mad and killing people to beams just by spinning at a rate that you cannot outrun the beams on. It looks like they have mostly fixed that now, and the way they've done it is by making Halkias start off the ability by spinning, which he never used to do. It would always stand still, plant himself in the ground, and then start spinning after the beams had come out. But now it looks like they've started him off by rotating, so it looks like I certainly haven't seen that issue come up again since 9.0.5 at least. I don't know if either of you have.
No, yeah, I can. So the issue with Halkias was that if you moved him right before he would start doing the Beyblade, or basically spinning around, he would go nuts, and he could either not move at all, or Dan say he could speed run and basically just spin at such an incredible speed that is impossible to dodge. However, what they've done now is that right before he starts casting it, he stands still, and therefore making that thing not work anymore, or the bug not happening anymore. So Halkias stands still for 1 second, and then he sits down, and then he starts casting. It was the bug that if you moved him just as he was casting it, then it would bug out. But with that 1 second delay, then that was that basically. Just remove that thing.
Yeah. Perfect. And so we've dealt with the final little bit of trash here. There was a groundskeeper's pullover on the far end of the room just to spawn the 80% pride, as you can see by the count there. Not even halfway through the dungeon with 7 deaths and already at 80.5% in the key. You can see that what Fem did here was he waited specifically for the Stoneborn to take off. When the Stoneborn, if you're the one who's controlled it, when the Stoneborn actually flies away once you've finished controlling it and the timer's run off, it does put you into combat. which I believe does force you out of invis, or if not, it doesn't go into invis with you, does it? That's it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go into invis with you, so obviously if you're pulling it with you, you're going to be pulling trash on top of you and very likely getting yourself killed. Fem was stuck in combat for some reason, which...
Yeah, if you walk over, or if the Stoneboard walks over an imprison, it puts it in combat.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, that's unfortunate. So he did have to die and get rezzed at the other end, but you saw that the rest of the group did just skip through. The other Demon Hunter committing an Invis Potion with the Paladin, as well as the Druid just going into stealth, and I believe the Hunter going into camouflage just to get themselves through. And now we move on to Echelon, which I'll run you through very, very quickly here. To spawn Echelon, you need to knock on the door, and then he just breaks it open, which is possibly the most unique way of spawning a boss I think I've seen over the past few years. Echelon is the hardest boss in here by every stretch. It is quite difficult. This is why you make the effort to try and have Pride and Lust going into this boss. The few abilities that it has is a Blood Torrent. You can see the result of a Blood Torrent on the floor right here. It is just targeted at a player. There is a swirly before it lands, which is easy enough to dodge. It didn't used to be telegraphed on beta, which was really fun. It was also instant, so there was no reaction time whatsoever. But now it is very well telegraphed, and it's easy enough to dodge. There is also the Call to Stone, I believe it is, which spawns these little stone fiends. The stone fiends will naturally gravitate towards the center if everyone stood there, because no matter who has aggro on them, obviously they'll try and come towards the middle, unless you hit them early. If you start hitting them early, chances are they will stop a bit further out and start trying to cast on people. So the most ideal thing to do is to prepare your AoE for when they get to the middle, but don't start it off too quickly. That can kind of mess things up if you do it just slightly wrong. They're easy enough to kill off. At Starfall, yeah, pretty much. They are easy enough to kill off. They don't have a huge amount of HP. When they die, for each one that dies, they inflict a bit of group-wide damage. If they all die at the same time, I mean, you even saw it on this pull here, they did get clapped pretty quickly. So the group themselves took quite a bit of damage. Let me just wind that back a little bit more to when they did actually die. No, that's when Fem died, not those. Here we go. So you see how quickly they fall down to this, right? They've got Wild Spirits, Starfall, everything's going off, and you see that the group is taking quite a bit of damage just as they go through, almost hitting 50%, and that's just on a 15. You can imagine that on a Tyrannical that's going to be ramped up just that little bit more. Straight after those ads are killed off, you see the Stone Shattering Leap that Echelon casts. Before the Stone Shattering Leap comes out, he inflicts a curse on every member of the group. The curse is, obviously, it can be dispelled by usual curse dispel methods. If that curse times out, it will freeze you in place. If you do get frozen in place, you are stunned for 3 seconds, and it means that you cannot dodge the Stone Shattering Leap. The leap is actually used to finally kill off the Stone Fiends. When you kill off the Stone Fiends yourself as a group, they don't die completely. They just become inanimate, and they start recharging their energy so they come back to life. The way to finally kill them off is to drag Echelon with that Stone Shattering Leap on top of the ads, which is why you want them stacked up, and get him to finish them off completely. If he doesn't, they'll eventually come back to life and just start casting on your group again, and while it's not a huge amount of damage, if that then overlaps with more ads spawning, because they will spawn constantly throughout the fight, you eventually go from a wave of 6 to potentially a wave of 12, to potentially a wave of 18 if you're not dealing with it properly, and that will get people killed pretty quickly. The leap itself you can avoid and should if you do get dispelled, so the usual practice would be to decurse the person who has the leap on them. So we'll see it in a moment. The leap's on Fem, for example, so here he should be dispelled. There is a druid in here, but he's not even dispelling himself. So you should be dispelling Fem, and then what Fem would do is either intervene to someone to get out of the leap, or just heroic leap out, just to avoid taking the leap. The leap itself does have some initial damage, as well as it, leaving a dot. The initial damage is not that heavy, the dot does hurt a lot, however. So you definitely want to make sure that you try and avoid that one where possible. Other than that, it is just a steady rotation of the same abilities, and eventually you force that one out. After
All
that,
of a sudden I'm a warrior, dude.
you are basically a warrior. You've been a warrior for every other key that's been in here. You might be on a DH now, but we all know where you're going in 9.1, so that's fine. Just getting everyone used to it now, you know. Again, after that, it is just more of the same mobs. You've got your Gargans here with the tank bleed ability. You've got your Hound Masters. Something to note about the Hound Masters, their Loyal Beasts cast, it is kind of predictable. It will cast at 50% on the Hound Master HP. If you have a stun available and you see the Hound Master dropping below 50% HP, make sure that you're keeping a good eye on it and have your stun ready just so you can interrupt it if needed. Something else that I've noticed is if it is either mid-cast before hitting 50%, or at the point that it hits 50%, or if it's CC'd long enough to drop down really low before it's cast Loyal Beasts, it just won't cast it. So if you wanted to, I suppose, when it hits 50%, you could try and CC it early and see if that happens if your group is AoEing the crap out of it, and it would likely die before casting. But realistically, you should just hold the stun and wait until it actually looks to cast it. It's definitely the safer thing to do. Otherwise, your tank is going to be most upset. But, you know, tanks have been upset for all of Shadowlands so far, so what else is new?
Yep.
The next pack on the inside, again, very straightforward. It's the same mobs that we've seen already. 2 Dark Blades, an Obliterator, and a Collector. We know what they do, and as you can see, we are now approaching... We are at 94%-ish, just under 94%. The final percentage will be gained from the mini-boss in the next room, but we are moving on to the third boss now, which is High Adjudicator, Elise, and Fem. Do you want to run through this one?
I think quickly we should mention the Stoneborn trigger.
Yeah, sure, go, yeah.
You can do that one.
Yeah, there's 2 Stoneborn. You can mind control them. I failed to do so. You can get both. If you have both on top of you when you start the first cast, and then spam the ability, you can get both. But as you can see, I failed to do that. So I'll just take the other one later. But basically, you should use them for the boss because they do much more single target damage than they do AoE. So generally, just use them for the boss rather than the pack in front.
Also why they're used on prides as well, more than actual packs.
Exactly. But this boss has like 4 mechanics.
Like every other boss.
Yeah. It has this Bolt of Power, which is just a cast on the tank. It has Volley of Power, which is a cast on the whole group. Much more important to interrupt Volley rather than the Bolt. It also has Anima Fountain, which is just spawning the orange poo-poo on the ground. Don't stand there, it spawns under players, so you're gonna have to move at some point. And the final mechanic is the ghost. It spawns a ghost. It's the most important mechanic. You have to kite the ghost into one of the 4 canisters on, like, there's 4 canisters on the edges of the rooms. Kite the ghost into it. If you get a 5th ghost, there will be a 5th canister respawning, but it's random which one respawns. So and it spawns slightly later than the 5th ghost spawns. So you'll just have to kite the 5th ghost for like, I don't know, 5 seconds, and then the canister will spawn, and you just get it into that one.
Yep, and that's High Adjudicator release, nice and straightforward.
Yep.
And then we move on to what is the final trash, which is the 7th type of mob in the entire key. Inquisitor Cigar, nice little mini boss. It is very straightforward. Now, very important. We have a thing that we like to call ethical DPS. This don't make this mistake, please. If I see any of you making this mistake, I'll be most upset. The Tormented Souls on the side of the room, Cigar's nice little audience here. They are what you want to focus until they are all dead. The mini-boss himself has a cast which is called, I don't even remember what it's called. Dark Communion, that's the one. Where he will channel into several of the Tormented Souls, and he will spawn manifestations of envy out of them, which you see just surrounding Fem at the moment. When he is channeling the Communion ability, he is also healing himself at a rate that you cannot out-DPS in most key levels, to be fair, unless you are particularly well geared in a 15 or maybe upwards to an 18. I believe the strategy was in MDI was also to just blast him down in an 18, right?
Yeah, you just killed him.
But obviously they were in the best gear that you could possibly have in this patch at the moment. So, and even then that wasn't consistent. I'm sure there are times where even that could look a little bit scary, depending. It's also obviously going to depend on the classes that you have and whether you have cooldowns and what have you. So the idea, more often than not, would be just focus down the Tormented Souls as much as you can. Boomkins are great in this room. Boomkins are outstanding in this room. Starfall shreds these mobs. It is incredible. But that being said, once all the Tormented Souls are gone, you can then start happily AoEing down the Manifestations of Envy. Cigar will slowly kill them off one by one by casting a Disperse on them, which causes those little red pools on the floor that you can see right now. The Manifestations do also fixate onto random group members. If someone gets more than one fixated on them, they can start hitting quite hard, so they do become relatively important to kill off somewhat quickly, but all of your priority damage definitely needs to go into the mini-boss here, as he does have a lot of HP. Outside of that, there is a wicked... Go ahead.
No.
Outside of that, there is just a wicked bolt cast, which obviously you do want to look to kick as often as possible, but DH takes 30% less magic damage at the moment, so they really don't care, and that's absolutely fine. What did you want to say, Fem?
About the Dark Communion. The boss, or the mini-boss, he sucks the life out of the souls that have the least health. So if you see a group of like 5 of them with 100% health and one with like 2% health, you should hit the kill off the one with 2%, even if it's worse for your overall.
Sure.
It will make the guy die faster.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then he will kill one of the 100% instead of you trying to kill the 100% ones, and then he kills the 2% one and leaves the 100% ones alive.
Yeah, it is just a way to speed up the room a little bit. Overall on that one, but normally what you'll find is unless you have classes with severely good spread AoE, like a Boomkin for example, or a mage with Combust and Flame Striking each individual pack, normally what you'll find is a DPS will take like a corner each, so to speak, and we'll just try and clean up the mobs that are there before then moving to the other corners and helping out with any of the Tormented Souls that are still alive. But yeah, again, ethical DPS, Tormented Souls first, Inquisitor Cigars second. If you do have
low health
Tormented Souls first, Inquisitor Cigars second. But again, just try and make sure that they all die as quickly as possible, and you generally don't have a problem there. You get your final pride before Lord Chamberlain, and you know what, Faithy, why don't you round us off on Lord Chamberlain here?
Sure. Chamberlain has a few mechanics. Most of them are somewhat easy to figure out on how to do. The first mechanic is Telekinetic Toss, where he will he will control one of the statues, which will fixate onto one player and dash across the room towards that player. Basically what it does is that if you get hit by the statue, you'll take a big amount of damage and you get knocked back. So preferably look what statue gets the red line and then go away from the direction that they look. And that's basically it. You don't want to get hit by that if possible. Next, we have... Well, there is a lot of abilities, but you don't usually see them on pull because you'll have a lot of cooldowns with the Pride. But we can talk about the Door of Shadow. Door of Shadow is basically telekinetic, just with all 4 of them. What he will do is that he will draw all 4 statues in around him, and then he will make them dash out. So what you'll have to do is that you have to get in between the statues, and as you can see here, they'll get knocked out in a cross. What you can do if you're melee, after all of the statues have gone around, you can go under the boss and just stand on the boss. We'll explain a little bit later how you can deal with the second Door Shadow. But directly after Door Shadow, you have Ritual of Woe. Ritual of Woe is basically a channel ability he'll do to every statue, which is a channeling ability that will deal damage if it hits the statue. It does also do damage to the player, but it's significantly less, as it only hits one player. So what you'd like to do is that you'd like to soak all of the lines. There is a trick on how you can soak 2 lines at a time. Is if you stand super close to him, in between 2 of them, as you can see Fem doing here, who is soaking the bottom left and the bottom right at the same time. What you could do is you could stand a little bit further than Fem, so you could soak the top left and the top right at the same time. So instead of having 3 people soaking, as you can see, who's Fem, Nutty, and the Hunter, it could just be Fem and the Demon Hunter, which will be a lot more manageable for the healer to only heal 2 than having to heal 3 people. Also, having someone with like really good defensives outside the tank soaking those 2 is preferable, as having those 2 lines on you does actually do quite a lot of damage. So next you have the Thor Shadows, which comes at 40%. I think the first one has 70%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So after she's done with Ritual of Woe, you can see what the immense amount of damage the crew has. She's casting Thor Shadow. If none of the statues have moved, you will know where the statue will go. Basically, the top right will go close top right, the top left will go close top left, and so on. So what you can do as a melee is that you can go directly on the boss. You can see Fem doing here, and you won't get hit by the statues. And you're safe. That is only if the statues haven't been telekinetically moved. If they have, move away from them and then move in later. And after Thor Shadow, again, you have the Ritual of Woe, and you can see it actually going off on the statue for a short bit, which actually does quite a lot of damage, even though it only takes for 2 times. The boss do have a few other mechanics that we don't see at all. First of all, it has a frontal, which is basically just a frontal you can dodge, which is very, very easy to see. However, if you push the boss super quick, you won't ever see this frontal. Secondly, she has a AoE swirly, which is a swirly around the boss, which you'll just have to run out of, just quick run out, go back in. And then lastly, it has a tank hitting debuff, which puts a dot on the tank, which deals a lot of magic damage. So that's just healing the tank. But all in all, that is the boss. And with enough DPS, you can actually skip most of its mechanic and makes it really, really super easy.
Yep. Again, you're going into this boss with pride and lust normally, so killing off the boss is relatively quick. Something that's worth noting about this boss in particular is it's actually a raid boss level mob. That's what I'm trying to say, which means that it is taking slightly less damage. So raid boss mechanics apply. So for example, everyone has a little bit less crit on that particular mob. Also, it can parry melees if you are attacking it from the front. So it can take a little bit longer to kill than maybe some of the other bosses in a lot of the dungeons. Mozala is another example of a raid boss level mob. But overall, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference, in all honesty. With Pride and Lust, again, the thing falls over pretty quickly. And again, yeah, that's Halls of Atonement. It's very straightforward, very simple. A lot of the same types of mobs, so you know what's coming at almost every single point in the dungeon. And yeah, there's really not a whole lot more to say about that, right?